Well, we're back for week 3. Wonderful to see everybody. And, I had such a good time. After the last session, I've just been thinking about a lot of the work that you guys have been talking about and re-listening to different things. And, I wanted to make the comment that, this work is not impossible, but it just takes time. And I'm sure any one of you, if you were doing a production, you'd all be brilliant in your own ways, but you just be given the constraints of a production, you just wouldn't have the time to unearth all of this stuff. And so to be able to see how granular you can get and to figure out, well, what exactly, what led to this moment. It's so thrilling to experience as an audience member, and I hope those who are listening or watching, you know, have an appreciation for that, because this doesn't always happen, but it's just when you take the time to do it, it's really exciting work. And I think maybe a lot of times it falls on the shoulders of the artists or actors or director outside of rehearsal. What are they thinking about in between sessions? But if you do take the time, like I said, it's not impossible to find some of this stuff. It just takes real thought to do it. So my hats off to all of you guys. You're doing such a great job. I'm really enjoying kind of rediscovering this play and finding all these nooks and crannies that I didn't even know were there before. So I'm just loving it, and I'll stop fawning over all of you, and
No,
I'll let
never
you.
stop fawning. Oh, please,
Yeah.
just
Oh, yeah, stop.
you can pause, but don't
Yes, that's
fully
true.
stop. That's
Yes. Well, I will pause for now, and I'll turn it over to you, Brendon, and hope you guys have a great session tonight.
Thank you, Nathan. Well, it's interesting that Nathan mentions this about it's not impossible, but we all know the constraints of rehearsal processes, and I think that one of the things I've been thinking about the last 2 weeks is that yes, we're only focusing on 2 scenes, right? And we're spending a number of hours on just, an eighth or so of the play. But I do think that what's valuable, and I mean, I'd love to talk even more about this maybe next week as we wrap up, but I'd love for you all to be thinking about some of the takeaways that are not just applicable to this play or Stoppard, but what are some things that we can take from this potentially to work on other scripts, whether classical or contemporary, because I think this play straddles both multiple styles. And one thing that struck me is that there's such value in slowing down. And I don't know about you all, but I know that, I'm a huge fan of table work, regardless of what the play is. Yay. Yes, Jen. And I really think I see a change happen when all it takes are a few actors that slow themselves down, that tap the brakes for themselves. And I think it sends a message to the cast, the rest of the cast, that that's okay. Because the director can say it all they want, take your time, but it's another thing entirely when people actually take you up on that, just from the director's point of view. And when they do, then everyone goes, oh, okay. And then things can start to float to the surface. And I think it let things become less daunting and dense. But I think so much of when watching you all is, and I'm just thinking for you, Téa, in particular, is you becoming so new to this, giving yourself permission to not run headlong or to achieve a result or to understand it all fully, but just to actually let yourselves breathe in it and register what's happening. Because I think that's another trap of Stoppard. Just like with Shakespeare, it's like, oh, I know what I'm saying, so I'm just going to run to the end zone. And then we're left behind, and your fellow actors are kind of left behind playing catch up, and we're not actually breathing in the thoughts with you. And so I don't know if you have any thoughts on those thoughts, but I just wanted to start with that. And I think Nathan teed that up nicely anyway. But it's just something I was thinking about, that it seems kind of basic, but actually is so important and kind of overlooked, is the pace in which we unpack a play. Any thoughts on that? And
Yeah. Yeah, I've worked with a number of directors, I think, that get nervous when they're would like to have structure as soon as possible. They want to get a sense of what the structure of the scenes are going to be and jump to blocking. And I remember when I did Measure for Measure at the Goodman, Bob Falls was directing. We did 2 weeks of table work. And it got to the point where people were sort of muttering, are we ever going to stage this thing? But the fact is that because we did so much detailed table work, all of the staging kind of just fell into place. Because people knew why they were saying what they were saying and who they were saying it to, and instinctively knew, and Bob knew as well, that, you know, where somebody needed to be to say what they needed to say. And it really was you know, on the other hand, I did have an experience once with Shakespeare and Company where we were doing a 12th night and we dropped the play in, and we took 3 weeks and we were going to take it to Toronto, and suddenly we realized we only had about 5 days to stage it. Oh, and so we were staging scenes 3 at a time.
Oh my gosh.
So you know, you can get to an excess, of course, but
sure.
But yeah, I find that, you know, when you take the time early on with the text, a lot of the other stuff falls into place.
Yeah. Well said, Jimmy. And thoughts? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Téa.
When I did 100 Words for Snow with Brendon in Connecticut, that was like my first show out of school. So I was and it was just me on the stage. So it was just like thousands of words, hundreds
for an hour and 40 minutes, we should say.
For an hour and 40 minutes, probably longer. just me and the words. So we took the time like at the table to digest it, and I was like terrified out of my mind because it was so much to handle, and I didn't know if I could do it. But Brendon is amazing, as we all know, and we broke it down. And I think that Thomasina is kind of in the same temperament that Rory was, like my character in the other show was, just like always like curious and wanting to know more, and just like finding where that more is, but also finding where I can slow down and where the words are kind of helping me, and kind of when things don't make sense, how can I use the words to help me get there, and things like that. So I think definitely with this text that I'm getting more familiar with, just kind of the pace and how things are going with each character in the arc of the story. I think it's a great thing to throw in there, just like slowing things down, even if like you as an actor know what's going on, your audience still needs to catch up with you. So making sure that you're all on the same page, that everyone is enjoying it at the same time. So yeah, I think that's fantastic.
It makes it a little less daunting, I would think, Téa, just going off of what you were saying, that sense of these ice flow of words, whether it's Shakespeare or a 1 or 2 person show or a Stoppard. When you look at that like, you know, that ice flow, so to speak, that like, how do you chip away at that? And I think it is like a beat at a time, one thought at a time. And that's how we process watching a play too. It's like, we don't just, you know, take in a speech in one gulp. So I think it's like you said, it's reflective of the audience keeping up too, but also the sense of like looking on the page going, oh my gosh, I got this aria for 2 pages. This feels intimidating, but I think giving yourself permission to kind of back through it a thought at a time and breathe through it. I've noticed that with actors when they go, oh, that wasn't so bad. You know, that was now that I let myself take my time through it, you know.
Yeah, and oh, go ahead, Chris.
Oh, okay. Well, I was thinking that not necessarily about going slow, but when we're given the time to sit and do table work as a group, I think actors are can be somewhat selfish with a text, right? We're looking at our lines, what we need to say. If you have a little bit of time, maybe page through and see what other people are saying about us. But we're focused on our character and what we are doing. And when we have the chance to sit in a group and you can get different perspectives from the other characters, stuff that we're not necessarily going to get if we're just blocking and staging. We're all investigating the text, and there can be some dialogue, and you can be shown stuff that you never would have seen on your own because you're getting the perspective from someone else across the table from you who isn't playing the part. And I love this, just getting into the text and the words and digging them and talking about the characters. And in this setting where like we aren't necessarily invested, this character's mine, this is my role, that we can talk about each other's motivations, what we're doing, and oh well, did you see this line? Like, what does that mean? This is so much fun. And I miss rehearsal processes that leave that part out because, you know, whatever reason, the budget is small. So let's cut a week off and we'll just get it on stage first. We're missing out if we're not digging into the words.
Yeah, I agree. That's largely what I was going to say. I'm a nerd, so I'm always going to be team table work. Yay. It's like, let's dig in and find more. But it's really exciting when you get to listen to other scenes because you can figure out like things about your character based on what other people are saying, things like that. But you can also like tee up things. Like if you know someone else, if you're listening to someone else's scene and you're like, oh, I can actually help that scene that I'm not in if I really like pop this plot point here in this scene, like that'll tee that up for later on. And, you know, when you're mostly concentrating on your scenes, you may not think of that unless you're sitting around a room going, oh, that's got a thread that links to here and that sort of thing. So it's fun.
As a quick example of that, Jen, I love that you mentioned that because I'm right now, early stages of staging The Winter's Tale with a high school conservatory in Worcester, and they got we just went through table work recently, and one of the things that people were noticing and throwing out was, oh my gosh, people are talking about time a lot, people are talking about faith a lot, and it's exactly what you said, Jen. I think you hit on the head of like, since we're all doing this together, I can help for the audience to go, wow, I'm hearing this, I keep hearing this time, I keep hearing these ideas, and same thing in Stoppard loves doing that too. So I think it's another way to not only help each other, but help the audience with those big ideas. And if everyone is aware, like, wow, we're all chiming in and taking our own stab at this big idea, then it's, to me, that's a lot. Frankly, it takes the onus off the director to be like, hey, by the way, you aren't aware of this, but in 3 other scenes, they talk about time. So it actually saves time at the beginning to front load everyone starting to clock that with each other and going, oh my gosh, well, Jen, I can help with that. And let's all make that a thing and be mindful of that. And I think that's so true. And Chris, just really quick, I feel like, to me, what you just said is fascinating because we have a couple of Septimuses here, but I think which is exciting. And also I feel like there's something about the idea of, yes, we're focused on our role, our lines and such, but at the same time, we're ultimately Team Arcadia. And how can we collectively, whether we're the only person playing the role, or if we're going to divide it up and we're going to go, in a more deconstructed way, either way, it's a sense of, I'm a piece of this. And it's a way to kind of also create ensemble. I think that having the table work allows us not just intellectually to connect, but start to feel like, oh, here's a way we can all help tell this story together and not feel like, well, I'm playing Septimus, so I don't really need to hear other people's thoughts because then, well, what's the harm, right? That's what I feel like. It's like everyone can just throw it into their knapsack and maybe it's worthwhile, maybe it's not, but that's another reason why I think it's better. It's good to do table work with the entire group rather than just those people in the scene, because like you say, Chris, someone on the outside might go, it's funny, I just noticed this about this character. And it's hard, right? When you have the tunnel vision of, you can only see so much, right? Everyone can only have a certain amount of what they've gleaned about a character. So why not hide-minded, you know? Yes, ultimately, a certain person will be doing those lines up on stage and that blocking, but in the early stages, why not all hands on deck, you know? Because these characters, like Shakespeare, are so rich and contradictory and are full of universes. So it's the more we learn about them from each other, I think the better. Like I'm discovering things about these characters I hadn't clocked, and I thought I knew this play. So I think it's all to the good, you know, if we allow ourselves to check our ego a little bit, to just feel like anyone can chime in about this and it doesn't feel territorial, you know. Kate, Jeff, anything to add?
I'll just say a couple of things. I don't have much to add because my thoughts have been pretty much articulated already. But what you were just saying, Brendon, reminded me. There is a directorial style of which I'm not particularly fond, where a director likes to only give information to one actor at a time. I don't know, in the belief that characters don't know each other's motivations or what's going on in real life in a scene. And it's a technique, but I've never liked it for much the same reason that you were saying. It's sort of the opposite of a collaborative way of working, which Chris and you, Brendon, will be familiar with what Téa used to do. We can't do it anymore for various reasons. Téa originally, this is the theater company that we are members of. I'm still here, so I still work with it occasionally. And their whole deal was to do sort of long-term study, lots of readings, lots of table work, you know, many Mondays of getting together before doing a play. It's much more of a conventional rehearsal style now, but we also used to double cast or partner cast or whatever you want to call it. There are different names, where two people would be playing the same part, not as primary and understudy, but as two co-equals. It's made for longer and often for the director more trying rehearsal periods, but it was great seeing someone else do your character, and because you had to be around and watch them do it. You learned a lot that way. It was a great technique. But again, these are all sort of luxuries and indulgences that are hard to come by, you know, when you're limited by time and budgets and all that sort of thing.
It was amazing, Jeff.
So
when I did the Noel Coward piece with Téa, and it was double cast, and I think it's a one act, and it already has 10 to 11 characters in it already. And then when we double cast it, it was extraordinary. And I was not prepared for how intense it was, but also amazing, because you'd have literally one cast would sit in the front row, and then with a tag team, we just do a chunk at a time. But I love the fact that I was so afraid people would feel like, what the hell are you doing with that character? That's not, but actually I would watch how the actors would think, well, what is the essential DNA of this character that we both agree on, and then we'll manifest it in our own way. That, you know, if I suggested, well, you could cross to your wife over there, how does that feel? Sure. And I remember, no, I think it was the wife crossing the husband, and one pair, the one playing the wife was like, I think I would sit on your lap. What do you think, honey? And then, and the actor would be like, yeah, that makes sense. And the other couple tried it, and they're like, no, I'd perch on the chair, the armchair, and one was not good or bad, but it was like, yeah, they both are totally valid. And it shows, it's like quantum mechanics, right? It's a little like this play of saying the multiverse is right there, that you can literally see, like, yeah, both are totally valid, and it works for those particular people, right? So if we were doing our production of Arcadia, that this is Lady Croom, this is Thomasina, this is JELLABY, like that's it, and somebody else is going to bring something else to it. So it really was a fascinating thing, Jeff, to see that no one owns the character. You know, there's so much there that you can come at in a different way.
That's my argument, that every production of any play is definitive. Because it's definitive because these are the people doing this play. and nobody else could do that play like these people do it.
I love that. Yeah, that's beautiful, Jamie. Kate, did you have a thought?
I was thinking about the perspective of the dramaturg in all this, and a little bit like what the actor would experience. I think one of the interesting things about being a dramaturg is you are in the room with a lot of different kinds of directors who have a lot of different kinds of processes. And, you know, everything from the Brendons of the world, where you do 10 days of table work and then stage Love Slavers Lost in 3 days for a 2.5-week rehearsal period, to people who do no table work, literally just start with scene 1 and figure out each scene as it goes along, to folks who have the method of table working each scene, but only with the people in it. And Jen, you're self-identifying as a nerd. I think we get along for some of those reasons, right? Book people. This is my actual office at work. This is what happens to you when you get a PhD in English, all the books. The more processes I've been a part of, the more rooms I've been in, the more I just double down on the importance of table work and of I would argue in some ways that this is a luxury, right? We get to spend 4 weeks on 2 scenes and talk about anything we want to talk about, and we don't have time pressing on us. But in other ways, I would argue that it's not a luxury, because the more times I've experienced it, that deep understanding of the text, especially with Shakespeare, but really anything that's heightened and any text, the more the actors understand exactly what they're saying, the more the group understands what we're trying to make together, the faster the staging goes and the more magical it is. Then you get this cohesion that I think just doesn't happen without this investment. So we could say that table work is a luxury. We could also say that it's a necessity. And, you know, not when you want to cut things, this isn't the thing to cut. Like, we need this time to do this job well, to do the play, you know, to do its service, to do each other's service. So yeah, it's interesting as everybody was describing this process or that one, that sort of dramaturg's perspective of watching a lot of people do a lot of different things, and I just double down on the value of every little word and doing it together.
And I feel one of the things I hear you talk about, Kate, is that's so well put, that the idea of specificity, right? It's like, to me, and that transcends any, you know, any play, to me, rises and falls on how much are we turning the screw moment to moment? How much are we really understanding what we're saying? And the more we understand it, it's, you know, by the time we open, you don't, not necessarily on day 1 or 2 or 8, but it's, by the time we are presenting this for an audience, it's not just, we first have to know what you're saying, then you can make some choices about it, right? And then you can, but the specificity is really, I think, a requirement. I you know, I agree with you, Kate, that this is a chance for us to put under the electron microscope 2 scenes that but I think people could look at this and go, okay, we could extrapolate off this to the whole play. And some of this would be work people could be doing outside of rehearsal, some of it in, but also just the value of saying you don't know what's going on in this moment. I'm not sure what, you know, we've had moments of that too, which I love and hope we'll continue to, of like drawing, you know, really fessing up to, I think, I'm not sure what Septimus is exactly referring to here. Great, because I think exciting things happen when we don't front. And because I think Stoppard and Shakespeare, for example, will call us out on that. You know, I learned that as a director too, where like I will be found out sooner than later if I go, oh yeah, well, I think it's kind of like this, and then like a day later, people come back, including the dramaturg, being like, you know, I don't think that makes sense. Like, yeah, I didn't really know what I was talking about. I just didn't want to look stupid with Stoppard, you know.
I think one analogy could be, how would you choose to build a house? From the foundation up or from the roof down?
Wow. Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, so here's going back, so thinking about foundations, I think we've done a lot of stop and start, which is great and important. I would love to propose that we use some of tonight to go back to sort of big swings, to go macro again and let ourselves go to and from beginning to end of each scene. And then we can circle back and address particular, points. So I would just, for those who are in the scene, if you have a pencil or pen at the ready or something to mark, so that I know we're in the middle of a scene, but if you can make a mark or jot something down, so if something occurs to you in the thick of it, let's make the note, but let's see what happens if we just keep going. And then we can circle back and unpack those. Does that make sense? Are we good with that? And so we can use what I would encourage us as we take these arcs through the scene. We've really now that we've started to dig into what they're saying, let's see what happens if we can keep the stakes as high as possible and in every moment, whatever they're needing, they need it a lot. And how many epiphanies can we give them? How often can they be blown away by themselves or by someone else? The more surprises could yield some interesting stuff. So those would be the two things I would say. Sound good? Okay. So when we're ready, Thomasina and Septimus.
Okay. Let me just apologize in advance in case the dog barks. She barks sometimes.
There's a dog on the grounds. It's all good. The Lady Croom loves dogs.
Mine may as well.
Dog.
Geoffrey, so.
Pretends it's the tortoise. Excuse me. The tortoise barking. Oops. Okay.
Septimus, what is carnal embrace?
Carnal embrace is the practice of throwing one's arms around a side of beef.
Is that all?
No, shoulder of mutton, a haunch of venison, well hugged, an embrace of grouse. Caro, carnus, feminine, flesh.
Is it a sin?
No, not necessarily, my lady. But when carnal embrace is sinful, it is a sin of the flesh. QED. We had Caro in our Gallic wars. The Britons lived on milk and meat. Late et carne vivunt. I'm sorry that the seed fell on stony ground.
That was the sin of Onan, wasn't it, Septimus?
Yes, he was giving his brother's wife a Latin lesson, and she was hardly the wiser after than before. I thought you were finding a proof of Fermat's last theorem.
It is very difficult, Septimus. You have to show me how.
If I knew how, there'd be no need to ask you. Fermat's last theorem has kept people busy for 150 years, and I had hoped it would keep you busy long enough for me to read Mr. Chater's poem in praise of love with only the distractions of its own absurdities.
Our Mr. Chater has written a poem.
He believes he's written a poem, yes. I can see that there might be more carnality in your algebra than in Mr. Chater's, couch of Eros.
Oh, it was not my algebra. I heard JELLABY telling Cook that Mrs. Chater was discovered in a carnal embrace in the gazebo.
Really? With whom, did JELLABY happen to say?
What do you mean, with whom?
Oh, with what? Exactly so. The idea is absurd. Where did the story come from?
Mr. Noakes.
Mr. Noakes?
Papa's landscape gardener. He was taking bearings in the garden when he saw, through his spyglass, Mrs. Chater in the gazebo in carnal embrace.
And do you mean to tell me Mr. Noakes told the butler?
No, Mr. Noakes told Mr. Chater. JELLABY was told by the groom, who overheard Mr. Noakes telling Mr. Chater in the stable yard.
Yes, Mr. Chater being engaged in closing the stable door.
What do you mean, Septimus?
So thus far, the only people who know about this are Mr. Noakes, the landscape architect, the groom, the butler, the cook, and of course, Mrs. Chater's husband, the poet.
And Arthur, who was cleaning the silver, and the boot boy. And now you.
Of course. What else did he say?
Mr. Noakes?
No, not Mr. Noakes, Mr. JELLABY. You heard JELLABY telling the cook.
Cook hushed him almost as soon as he started. JELLABY did not see that I was being allowed to finish yesterday's upstairs rabbit pie before I came to my lesson. I think you have not been candid with me, Septimus. A gazebo is not, after all, a meat larder.
I never said my definition was complete.
Is carnal embrace kissing?
Yes.
And throwing one's arms around Mrs. Chater?
Yes. Now, Fermat's last theorem.
I thought as much. I hope you are ashamed.
Aye, my lady.
If you do not teach me the true meaning of things, who will?
Ah. Yes. Yes, I am ashamed. Carnal embrace is sexual congress, which is the insertion of the male genital organ into the female genital organ for the purposes of procreation and pleasure. Now, Fermat's last theorem, by contrast, asserts that when x, y, and z are whole numbers, each raised to a power of n, the sum of the first two can never equal the third when n is greater than 2. But nevertheless, that is the theorem.
It is disgusting and incomprehensible. Now, when I am grown to practice it myself, I shall never do so without thinking of you.
Thank you very much, my lady. Was Mrs. Chater down this morning?
No. Tell me more about sexual congress.
There is nothing more to be said about sexual congress.
Is it the same as love?
Oh, no. No, it's much nicer than that. I am teaching JELLABY.
You're muted, Jamie.
JELLABY. I can't hear you. I'm teaching.
Sorry.
I'm teaching. I am teaching JELLABY.
Beg your pardon, Mr. Hodge. Mr. Chater said it was urgent you receive his letter.
Oh, very well. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chater asked me to bring him your answer.
My answer? Oh, well, my answer is that, as is my custom and my duty to his lordship, I am engaged until 11:45 in the education of his daughter. When I am done, and if Mr. Chater is still there, I shall be happy to wait upon him in the gun room.
I will tell him so. Thank you, sir.
What is for dinner, JELLABY?
Boiled ham and cabbages, my lady. And a rice pudding.
Oh, goody!
Oh, so much for Mr. Noakes. He puts himself forward as a gentleman, a philosopher of the picturesque, a visionary who can move mountains and cause lakes, but in the scheme of the garden, he is as the serpent.
When you stir rice pudding, Septimus,
Yeah.
the spoonful of jam spreads itself round, making red trails like the picture of a meteor in my astronomical atlas. But if you stir backward, the jam will not come together again. Indeed, the pudding does not notice and continues to turn pink just as before. Do you think this is odd?
No.
Well, I do. You cannot stir things apart.
No more you can, but time must needs run backward, and since it will not, we must stir our way onward, mixing as we go, disorder out of disorder into disorder until pink is complete, unchanging and unchangeable, and we are done with it forever. This is known as free will or self-determination. Sit.
Septimus, do you think God is a Newtonian?
An Etonian, almost certainly, I'm afraid. We must ask your brother to make it his first inquiry.
No, Septimus, a Newtonian. Septimus! Am I the first person to have thought of this?
No.
I have not said yet.
If everything from the furthest planet to the smallest atom in our brain acts according to Newton's law of motion, what becomes of free will?
No.
God's will.
No.
Sin?
No!
Oh, very well.
If you could stop every atom in its position and direction, and if your mind could comprehend all the actions thus suspended, then if you were really, really good at algebra, you could write the formula for all the future. And although nobody can be so clever as to do it, the formula must exist just as if one could.
Yes. Yes, as far as I know, you are the first person to have thought of that. In the margin of his copy of Arithmetica, Fermat wrote that he had discovered a wonderful proof of his theorem, but as the margin was too narrow for his purpose, he did not have time to write it down. The note was found after his death, and from that day to this...
Oh, I see now. The answer is perfectly obvious.
This time, I think you may have overreached yourself.
Nice. Yeah, that's lovely.
Yay.
Nice work. Wow, it was just it's already so rich from all the moment to moment that we started exploring the last 2 weeks. So what jumped out at you? What was the for those in it, those listening, what was that like?
Well, I'll start. What I find for Septimus is each time I do it, but particularly as we find more details, is his mind is all over the place. It's not in a bad way, but he seems to have a lot of things to think about. He's not distracted the way Thomasina is kind of, like water in a hot pan. She's just shooting all over the place. Jamie had some great note about her. I actually wrote it down.
Ecstasy.
She's in a constant state of ecstasy, right? And there's just Septimus he's certainly engaged with her and interested in her. I think he likes teaching, but he also likes thinking about his own world. And then when in this whole carnal, the actual carnal embrace, what she's actually talking about, when that comes up, that's a whole nother scenario. That's a more personal thing. I mean, he's partly in his mind and partly in his, again, it's like the whole play. He's partly in this big thinking stuff and partly in, how do I handle this situation right here, right now?
Yeah. Which you thought had no consequences. You just found out.
Well, yes,
out of the mouth of babes, you have been found out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Go
ahead, please.
I think when we put it all together, just because of all the ideas that we've been like kind of stacking up for the last few weeks, I think the concept of like how can I surprise myself each time really showed this time, because it's just there's so much in each little thing. And then I think something that really stood out to me this time was when Thomasina kind of grasps the fact that, wait a minute, like you weren't honest with me, because what the definition that you just said has nothing to do with what I just overheard. So this is weird. So I think just kind of I think every single thing that I'm thinking about can like be discovered in a different way. Like it doesn't all have to be like, but it can be like, like it doesn't all have to be like one note in that way, which I found with like the different discoveries. But yeah, just kind of the same as Septimus, there's so much to think about. And I think slowing it down, like we were talking about in the beginning, really helped me discover that as well.
And it feels like, Téa, when you taking that moment about when you realize this doesn't add up, and this is something I think we could explore maybe even more when we do it again, but you ought to be ashamed of yourself. The
Yeah.
choice of words, which is not, I think shame is not something that tends to come up with her. But I love that, and I think there's an opportunity that, I mean, Stoppard loves to play, I think, with these double meanings, right? Where one character thinks, oh crap, oh my God, I've been found out, right? So I think that part of what you were saying earlier, Jen, about how do we tee things up for each other, something that's occurring to me on a macro level is I think we could start to think more now about those moments of irony. And when you say, shame on you, I think if you lean more into that, Téa, potentially, of that cuts so deeply to you, you are truly, honestly ashamed, that can read to you, Jeff, like, she's discovered me.
Yeah.
I've been found out. And then it isn't until she explains, you have committed the sin of keeping me in ignorance. Okay. I was a, you know what I mean? I feel like Septimus has to be, has to have his feet over the fire for a moment, and that it's Thomasina who didn't realize what she's doing. She's kind of triggering him but but it really comes from a place of shame on you. So it works for both of you, but just for very different reasons. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I love that the shame is not the the act of having it off with the chater. I just love it. They call it the chater.
Yeah.
The sin is not being truthful with her. That's the sin.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's the shameful thing. That's what I should be
Yes.
ashamed of.
About that, because
And I think it is. I think as you say, you're right. She catches him out there.
And then I think you have the opportunity to, Jeff, when we come back to is you have that, you have right?
Yes.
And I wonder if there's an opportunity there for Septimus to, in your relief, to really lean in and own, you're absolutely right. I am ashamed of that. Now that I know what we're talking about, and it's not about the act of carnal knowledge, I'm just wondering, can he give her a bigger gift there of, you called me out and you got me dead to rights.
Mhm.
This is, it's like, and it's a nice thing for you, Tay. I wonder if she really feels validated. You really went to an extreme place of shame on you, and how refreshing to see an adult own it.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I think the best gift that anyone can give Thomasina is like knowledge and more just things that she doesn't know, or just more information about things that she thinks she knows fully. So like this is like a really big letdown of,
Yeah.
why would you do that? Like, don't you want
Right.
to be like the best I can be? Like, this is like, what do you mean? So I think just like someone, Septimus, who I feel like I trust fully, just taking the time to acknowledge my disappointment is like a big uh, teller of our relationship as well. That he would take the time to be like, you know what? I apologize for that. Let me tell you exactly what it is in specific detail, leaving nothing out, so that you know exactly what I'm talking about. And let's see if you really want to know what it is now.
Yeah.
Right. And I exactly. It's such a great different tack, right? That's what struck me too, that it's like, all right, I'm gonna just overwhelm you with biology.
Yeah.
And just insert A into B, and it's like IKEA instructions. And then I think it's so smart that he goes to the non-shame place, but he takes away any of the eroticism. There's nothing hot about it. It's literally like, tabs. And that is it. And that way it's great, Jeff. I think you can potentially, I think you can enjoy the fact when she gives you the ew. I think there's the opportunity, maybe, Jeff, to relish that more. Well, that's the theory, but I guess you don't like it. I guess you're gonna stay away from that for a couple of years.
Yeah.
2 points for Septimus. I think there's more opportunities, Jeff, to pat yourself on the back. Give yourself those moments. There's plenty of moments that we're discovering when you slip up, I think there's also those moments on the flip side of, damn, I'm good. You know, her revulsion was chef's kiss. Perfect. Yes, that's, I mean, it was maybe even more than you had hoped for, right? 'Cause I love Téa that time that you just gave that full, you know, 10 point of the Richter scale. I'm going to hurl everything you just said.
Disgusting. Oh my gosh.
You know, it goes that deep for her. So. Other thoughts from the group? Yeah.
I have some thoughts. So before I speak, I had to leave early last week, so I didn't see the work on this scene. So if I say anything that's been said already, you can just tell me to shut my pie hole. But it was occurring to me listening to this time, like what a heavy lift these 5 pages are in this play. It's just the first scene of the play, and you two have to establish your relationship with each other, how smart you are. Like you're kind of giving the lay of the land. You're introducing characters that we're not going to see for a few bits. Like there's a shit ton going on in this scene, and still you guys have to have a relationship happening here that's been lived in before we get to this point. You know, before we get to the first line of the play. So good luck with that. But Jeff, when you were saying that Septimus's mind is all over the place, I actually would say that that's, to my way of thinking, that's an opportunity to show how quick Septimus is. It's not that his mind is all over the place, it's that he can do these things. He can think this, and then he can think this, and then he can have this, and he can keep them all in the air all the time. So, like, almost, it's interesting to me to see when he gets information that then he fumbles, because he's such a smart man that Thomasina throws him off guard. A 13-year-old, which also shows how smart the 13-year-old is. And then I had a question. I don't know if you guys brought this up last time, but on page 10 at the end, when Septimus goes from, you're the first person to have thought of this, and then I know it's stage directions that we might ignore in a production, but we're doing table work, so I'm looking at the stage direction. It says with an effort. Like, why is switching to Fermat's theorem an effort? I don't know what the answer to that is. I don't know if you've discussed it last week or not.
We did not, and that's very good, because that's a place where I'm faking it till I make it, because I'm not exactly sure myself why it's such an effort.
Well,
what
doesn't Septimus leave like the note, because we're talking about the note. Like the note was found after his death, and then in the scene that we're doing next, like he left a note and something. I don't know. Maybe he's thinking. I know we said he's thinking about his death because we're going to go into something else after this, but just like, maybe that's too obvious, but like the note was found after his death, and like something is about to occur with
I think that refers back to it, and then Thomasina, of course, will leave a note, right? She as a sort of callback to it. But the way I've been thinking about it is that she's made him, what she has said, he is recognized as something that nobody's thought of before, or that I've heard about, right? He said, no, nobody's thought about that, as far as I know. This is one of those points where his mind seems to be ticking over quickly, is in the sense of, although nobody's found a proof of the theorem, people have been trying, and maybe she's somehow already on the way to finding a proof for this theorem. So am I sort of telling her this story while I'm thinking, God, I wonder if she's onto something. The story is there is a proof to the theorem, supposedly, even though nobody's found it. Fermat found it. So I don't know. Somebody help me out here.
Well, I was
can't
gonna just throw in that it's the result of everything that's come before, that Thomasina has a way of turning up the heat. I mean, you know, it's like temperature, the temperature of the scene. You know, all scenes have an arc, of course, but there's something about the way this starts, what Chris was talking about, where somebody just turns the temperature up, you know, on the gas stove. She does with that question. And,
Yes.
you know, you're like you were saying that your mind's in all these different places at once, and JELLABY comes in and gives you the letter, and, you know, it just felt to me like that the heat keeps getting turned up and you're like simmering, you know, that there's a kind of you know, because that is what Thomasina does, you know.
Right. Right.
He just turns the heat up throughout the scene, and I'm you know, I think it boils over in
That makes sense. And
in the ferment thing where you're suddenly like, you know, there was this personal thing going on, that, you know, the event that happened, and her wanting to know about carnal knowledge, and you know, like you said, all this stuff is going on. You're just sort of simmering, and then suddenly she comes up with a potential answer to Fermat theorem. You know, it's just
yeah, that's excellent, and that image is very useful, because I think that's what happens. It's like I think he's talking to her, saying there is a possibility that there is a proof of this. And he doesn't want to say it to her, I don't think, but he's thinking, he's also processing. He's thinking, wait a minute, is she onto something? Is this the beginning of the answer?
So it's roiling.
It's roiling, yeah.
Yeah.
Like you said, the heat's gone up a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and I think, Jeff, to connect to what Chris said earlier, if we want to lean into showing you being a little more, for lack of a better term, slicker in your dexterity of being able to multitask earlier in the scene, you can be, you know, he knows he's clever and he's able to do multiple things at once. There is something different then off of what you and Jamie are talking about, of if you are giving this your full attention in a way that you haven't quite before, you know, you're dealing with the Chater stuff, you're dealing with her, and you're having to multitask. Okay, I grossed you out, but I'm also still on Chater. So maybe some of the effort and some of the boiling over and the simmering that I'm hearing you both talk about is also the act of the effort Septimus is putting in to just focus on this with her, and being really mindful about sharing this with her. Yeah, Kate, did you have a thought?
Yeah, I was thinking back to one of the first things you said, Téa, about discovery. And in this particular moment that you were discovering the way Thomasina is discovering, and there are different kinds of discoveries. And so you were playing those different kinds of discoveries. The thing that she says to Septimus before he has to have some effort, when you are breaking this down, that I had written in my margins, big thought and build. You've got all these little big words, right? You've got if this, and if this, then if this, and then, and there's not a then, but, and then it would be really clear. And so like the way that she's putting the pieces together is like doing a piece of math. And each one of those phrases of this long speech is a discovery. And her mind is so quick, right? If you did this, and then this, and then this, the formula exists. You just have to do it with algebra. And that little like parenthetical, although nobody can be so clever as to do it. And of course she is, right? Now she knows how to do it, and she's going to start the algebra to put this together. I think for Septimus, the first realization, I've never heard anybody say that before. You might be the first one to say it. When you were talking about how clever he is, this moment, she's more clever, right? Like, what do you say to that? He's been teaching her.
Oh, that's
Well, I'll
great.
teach you what carnal embrace is. And I'm, you know, I've got, it's like when the teacher has the handle on everything, and then that incredibly smart student, it just surpasses him in that moment. And how does he gather himself and like, oh yeah, you know, Vermont suggest he put it in the margins. He's kind of like trying to get himself back on track, but she's had this moment of brilliance and of insight that I think just gives him pause, and he has to think about what to say next. He has to try to explain to her something that she already understands better than he does.
Great,
Yeah.
Jen.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say I was listening to it kind of zoomed out, and my teacher brain kicked in. Because sometimes I get to teach Shakespeare to folks, which I love at all different age ranges. And there's something so specifically delightful about teaching Shakespeare to kids, because it's equal parts inspiring and totally humbling. Because you come in, or I come in with like a curriculum, like, okay, and today I'm going to blow your mind with scansion or something, and I'm really excited. And then some 8-year-old comes out with a thought that makes me go, okay, here's your PhD. And thank you for teaching me that. Like, I have numerous times said to like a 9 or 10-year-old, if I ever play this role, may I have your permission to steal that choice? Because that's genius. And I've never seen an adult make that choice. Can you explain to me why? And then their rationale is so clear, but out of a different perspective, right? So mine's coming from dramaturgical. I looked up what that word means. I'm thinking of an example, like an Operon who was running off stage and right before the line, I'm invisible and will overhear their conference. And this 8-year-old just runs for the exit. And I was about to stop him because he has to stay for the rest of the scene. But I'm glad I didn't, because he screeched to a stop and went, I'm invisible. I'll overhear the conference. And I was like, you know, adults go like, I'm a witch, like I've got magical powers, and they do all this justification. And I asked him, and he goes, oh yeah, you just forgot. You just forgot that he was invisible. I was like, that's genius. And no adult would ever make that choice.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was just enjoying it, like of that, like my teacher brain was like, yeah, sometimes you get
Yeah.
that student and you're like, I have nothing to teach you.
Well,
I'm grateful
because
that you
they're
are
not-
teaching me
yeah.
for the next hour.
And they're not saddled with all of the lexicons and the scansion. And like you said, Jen, they're coming to it so fresh. And I think like that's exactly right on the money with Thomasina. And I mean, and speaking of that, Téa, something for us to look at next time is the formula must exist just as if one could. I think to build on what Kate was saying, there's a term I like to use, folks, with Shakespeare and now Stoppard, which I got from my friend Patricia Delory. She teaches voice and speech at FSU Oslo, and she likes to talk about little big words, the ands, buts, you know, it's conjunction, junction, right? And those linking thoughts of doubling down or pivoting. And I think this is one of those great examples, Téa, of all of those things that Kate pointed out, the ifs, ands, but, and I think for everybody here, that could be something we could think about heading into next week, is that like, I think we're going to be surprised at how many of those tiny words that then can send us in a different direction. Or are we playing Jenga and we're just building it like you're doing? And I think that, Téa, just thinking about when Septimus says yes, right, after that first pause, is there something interesting about that? But what just occurred to me was, you know, you are, you know, you offer this up hoping that, you know, either tell me I'm wrong or give me some validation, but you know, you're reaching for the stars here. He says yes. And what occurred to me just now is that could Thomasina be thinking he's just saying yes to, yes, the formula must exist. Like, you know what I mean? That small flashlight. And then the next big, that so that you're not prepared at all for, and yes, you're the first to think of this. So it's that double whammy of, oh my God, yes, I'm onto something. But then the thing you're really not prepared for is, you're the first person to think of this. And what struck me watching Téa is, I love that you were exploring her sense of, yay! Is there also something a little scary about that? Or something that you have no reference point for? Does your compass spin? Because what if you had never really imagined, ever, really? Septimus saying, I have no response to that. I have no answer to that. You are saying something I've never thought of. Do you know what I mean? Like, in your mind, maybe Thomasina fantasizes, oh yeah, but then he'll go, no, JK, of course I know, right?
Yeah.
But he actually says, you're the first person. I mean, if you really think about that, and she's smart enough to go, what? Like, what does that even mean? It's not like the earlier victories of the scene of, yeah, I'm smart and I got it. To me, it opens up a door that I don't know what that means, but I feel like it means something to witness him saying to you, no one has ever thought of that before. I don't know what that would be like if someone said that to me, let alone the 13-year-old me. I just offer that up in terms of, I think does that make sense, Téa, in terms of just.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. I think that's an overwhelming sense of responsibility that I feel like falls on me. It's like, oh my gosh, am I gonna have to teach the rest of the world my theory? Like, do I become number one? Like what comes from? I feel like everything is like, what
Right.
comes from this? This is
Right. You've
like,
become Keanu Reeves in The Matrix, right?
like
And you are now the one. And then the fun can be when you hear him say, oh, and Vermont wrote it on the side of the margins, and you're like, oh, he was a prankster.
yeah.
Oh, oh, right. But for a moment you glimpsed the cosmos, right? You had your Carl Sagan moment. And then I love that you come crashing down to a 13-year-old. Oh, prank. Total prank.
Yeah. I think
Right.
deep down, well, I feel like I've always wanted to reach that moment of having Septimus be like, you're right. I don't know what to say. But then when we finally reach that, because I say it earlier in the scene, like, am I the first person to have thought of that? Like, oh my gosh. It's like, nah, yeah. But then like now it's for real and it's like, oh no, I can't accept this right now. Like I need to learn more. Like I don't really have it in me. Like halt. So I think I think it's a perfect choice. I think that's awesome. I think that's really fun.
And it could be fun too, Jeff, for you of like, then you're still on the fact that she's blown your mind, right? So then her laughing could have, I love that you're like, you might have overreached yourself now. If you think this is absurd, I think you've now gone into hubris, right? It's like, oh, you've cracked the secret of the universe so much that you're just laughing at Vermont. You know, we might have drunk our own Kool-Aid a little too much here, in that moment. But yeah, I mean, I think there's just it's something that's really fun to explore in those pauses. I think that what was great too, I just want to clock this, that all three of you, even while we're still on script, we're finding the use of trying to take the air out, right? So that not that it's fast, but by keeping the cues tight, when we had those pauses, Jeff, of the yes, or that moment of, registering gunroom even, those meant something. Because I think it's similar to like those empty beat, those beats in Shakespeare where you don't have the text, but there's still those beats on the line. There's power in that, so it's just something for us to keep looking at. Great. Can we take a little break, and when we come back we'll pick up with the next scene.
Great.
It's 9:08. How about we take 7 minutes and come back at 9:15?
Good.
Sounds good.
Thank
Cool.
you.
Thanks, everybody. I feel like, it'd be amazing is like then 2.0 of this is then we pivot to all of like the modern characters.
Yeah. Good.
Right?
Yeah.
Nightingale's a great character, man. It's just
Ugh.
they all are. They're all great.
All right, so shall we jump into scene 6? And I'll read in some of the stage directions since this has a little bit more of them. Are we ready?
Yes.
The room is empty, early morning, a distant pistol shot to the sound of the crows. JELLABY enters the dawn-dark room with a lamp. He goes to the window and looks out. He sees something. He returns to put the lamp on the table, then opens one of the French windows and steps outside.
Mr. Hodge!
Septimus comes in, followed by JELLABY, who closes the garden door. He's wearing a greatcoat.
Thank you, JELLABY. I was expecting to be locked out. What time is it?
5:30.
Ah, that is what I have. Well, what a bracing experience.
He produces 2 pistols from inside his coat.
Oh.
The dawn, you know, unexpectedly lively. There's fishes, birds, frogs, rabbits, and very beautiful. If only it did not occur so early in the day. I've brought Lady Thomasina a rabbit. Will you take it?
It's dead.
Yes. Lady Thomasina loves a rabbit pie.
You were missed, Mr. Hodge.
I decided to sleep last night in the boathouse. Did I see a carriage leaving the park?
Captain Bryce's carriage, with Mr. and Mrs. Chater also.
Gone.
Yes, sir. And Lord Byron's horse was brought round at 4 o'clock.
Lord Byron, too.
Yes, sir. The house has been up and hopping.
But I have his rabbit pistols. What am I to do with his rabbit pistols?
You were looked for in your room.
By whom?
By her ladyship.
In my room.
I will tell her ladyship you are returned.
JELLABY, did Lord Byron leave a book for me?
A book.
He had the loan of a book from me.
His lordship left nothing in his room, sir. Not a coin.
Oh, well, I'm sure he would have left a coin if he'd had one. JELLABY, here's half a guinea for you.
Thank you very much,
What has occurred?
The servants are told nothing, sir.
Come, JELLABY. Does half a guinea buy nothing anymore?
Her ladyship encountered Mrs. Chater during the night.
Where?
On the threshold of Lord Byron's room.
Aha. Which one was leaving and which entering?
Mrs. Chater was leaving Lord Byron's room.
And where was Mr. Chater?
Mr. Chater and Captain Bryce were drinking cherry brandy. They had the footman to keep the fire up until 3 o'clock. There was a loud altercation upstairs and...
Well, Mr. Hodge,
My lady?
will this too shoot a hare?
A rabbit? No, indeed. A hare. Though very rabbit-like.
My infusion.
Yes, my lady.
How dare you?
I cannot be called into account for what was written in private and read without regard to propriety.
Addressed to me?
Left in my room in the event of my death.
What earthly use is a love letter from beyond the grave?
As much, surely, as from this side of it. The second letter, however, was not addressed to your ladyship.
I have a mother's right to open a letter addressed by you to my daughter, whether in the event of your life, your death, or your imbecility. What do you mean by writing to her rice pudding, when she has just suffered the shock of violent death in our midst?
Whose death?
Yours, you wretch.
Oh, yes, I see.
Do not know which is the madder of your ravings. One envelope filled the rice pudding, the other of the most insolent familiarities regarding several parts of my body. I have no doubt which is the more intolerable to me.
Which?
Oh, aren't we saucy when our bags are packed? Your friend has gone before you, and I have dispatched the harlot Cheta and her husband, and also my brother, for bringing them here. Such is the sentence, you see, for choosing unwisely in your acquaintance. Banishment. Lord Byron is a rake and a hypocrite, and the sooner he sails for the Levant, the sooner he will find society congenial to his character.
Has been a night of reckoning.
Indeed. I wish it had passed uneventfully with you and Mr. Chaytor shooting each other with the decorum due to a civilized house. You have no secrets left, Mr. Hodge. They spilled out between shrieks and oaths and tears. It is fortunate that a lifetime's devotion to the sporting gun has halved my husband's hearing to the ear he slept on.
I'm afraid I have no knowledge of what has occurred.
Your trollop was discovered in Lord Byron's room.
Ah, discovered by Mr. Chaytor.
Who else?
Well, I'm very sorry, madam, for having used your kindness to bring my unworthy friend to your notice. He will have he will have to give an account of himself to me, you may be sure.
JELLABY enters the room with her infusion.
I will do it.
Jamie, you're muted.
Sorry.
I will do it.
Yes, milady. Lord Byron left a letter for you with the valet, sir.
Oh, thank you.
When did he do so?
As he was leaving, your ladyship.
Allow me.
I do not know that it is proper for you to receive a letter written in my house from someone not well.
Very improper, I agree. Lord Byron's want of delicacy is a grief to his friends, among whom I no longer count myself. I will not read his letter until I have followed him through the gates.
That may excuse the reading, but not the writing.
Your ladyship should have lived in the Athens of Pericles. The philosophers would have fought the sculptors for your idle hour.
Really? Oh, really? Oh, really?
Now there's a thing. A letter from Lord Byron, never to be read by a living soul. I will take my leave, madam, at the time of your desiring it.
To the Indies?
The Indies, why?
To follow the Chaytor, of course. She did not tell you.
She did not exchange half a dozen words with me.
I expect she did not like to waste the time. The Chaytor sails with Captain Bryce.
Ah, as a member of the crew?
No, as wife to Mr. Chaytor, plant gatherer to my brother's expedition.
I knew he was no poet. I did not know it was botany under the false colours.
He is no more a botanist. My brother paid £50 to have him published, and he will pay £150 to have Mr. Chaytor picking flowers in the Indies for a year, while his wife plays mistress of the captain's quarters. Captain Bryce has fixed his passion on Mrs. Chaytor, and to take her on voyage, he has not scrupled to deceive the Admiralty, the Linnean Society, and Sir Joseph Banks, botanist to His Majesty at Kew.
Her passion is not as fixed as his.
It is a defect of God's humour that he directs our hearts everywhere but to those who have a right.
Indeed, madam. But is Mr. Chaytor deceived?
He insists on it, and finds the proof of his wife's virtue in his eagerness to defend it. Captain Bryce is not deceived, but cannot help himself. He would die for her.
Oh, I think, my lady, he would have Mr. Chaytor die for her.
Indeed, I never knew a woman worth a duel. or the other way about. Your letter to me goes very ill with your conduct to Mrs. Chater, Mr. Hodge. I have had experience of being betrayed before the ink is dry, but to be betrayed before the pen is even dipped, and with the village notice board. What am I to think of such a performance?
My lady, I was alone with my thoughts in the gazebo when Mrs. Chater ran me to ground, and I being in such a passion, in an agony of unrealized desire.
Oh?
I thought in my madness that the Chater with her skirts over her head would give me the momentary illusion of happiness to which I dared not put a face.
I do not know when I have received a more unusual compliment, Mr. Hodge. I hope I am more than a match for Mrs. Chater with her head in a bucket. Does she wear drawers?
She does.
Yes, I have heard that drawers are being worn now. It is unnatural for women to be got up like jockeys. I cannot approve. I know nothing of Pericles or Athenian philosophers. I can spare them an hour in my sitting room when I've bathed. 7 o'clock. Bring a book.
Lovely. Why should he, why bring a book, Jen?
Well, I think it gives an excuse for a rendezvous, and also, I think intellect is foreplay for her. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, no, I mean
One
that
thing I was
makes
like,
yeah. So it's both
you know,
it's an alibi as well as the foreplay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
my thought. What do you think?
No, I mean I love that. Well, it's interesting that you like that the last thing you say to him, you know, it feels like we definitely know who's dictating the terms. And that's both not just in terms of, yes, I will allow you to visit me, but also this is exactly how we're going to do it. And the only, and I could imagine that like, it seems Septimus is pretty transparent at this point, as are most men in a situation like this. So I think it makes sense that you have to spell this out to him of like, I don't want you just running into my boudoir.
It's not a family.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And there are the servants to consider, and we are in this world, and like, he may just want to run right into your room, but like you always have one part of your bandwidth to everyone is watching. Right? They like talk about multitasking like we did earlier. It's like you can have your desires and you want this, but also decorum.
Right.
And it's a win-win because we will use that book, but also we're not going to we're not going to make the mistake of like Byron, and that whole thing that happened. I love that you're just like you have one job.
Yeah.
And I am not, if I see you without a book at the entrance to my room, no admittance. Because people will talk. And to me, that just is another beautiful indication of her character, of a sense of like, I can have all this and all this desire and banter and everything. And as I'm sweeping away before I go, I'm giving you direction. That's non-negotiable. It's so great that she can have that kind of forethought. And then it ends with you burning the letters, which I don't think we've really talked that much about, Chris.
No.
Because it bring a book feels like that could be the end of the scene, right? It's this great kind of verbal button, but it's not. So we have 3 letters that are burned in this scene. Yeah.
There's no need for the letters anymore on the most practical level, because he doesn't need to leave a letter for Thomasina because he's going to see her. And she's already read the letter. And burning it is helping her. Like, let's get rid of the evidence. You know?
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, I love that. And I love that you're not doing it with her watching, right? That's just like, you know, this as well, Chris, of like, you're doing this for her and for yourself. And like, this is not something, the earlier burning is performative.
Yes.
I mean, or it's for an agenda. These are not for her eyes to see, but they just need to be done. And as much as you want to follow her up to her room, I love that you actually, like, Septimus, now that you know what is going to be happening next, yeah, I love that you are taking the time to get rid of the evidence. You know, it seems like, Chris, you're taking a page out of her book of like, bring the book, burn the letters. We need to keep this all very airtight and discreet.
Yeah. I think that also there's so much talk about writing in this scene, like the letters that I've written, the letters that Byron has written, the letter to me, but also her great speech about being betrayed before the ink is dry, or before the pen is dipped, and the notice board. That I also think that the Bring a Book is just a little bit of Stoppard back to all that writing too. You know?
Yes, I love that. It is like the cherry on top. Absolutely, because it's just it really is part of what you two now have as your common language, which is interesting, because of course you were there to, part of your job as a tutor is to educate Thomasina on a lot of subjects, but you're also very well read, like we talked about last week or the week before. Your side hustle is reviewing, right? So you're quite erudite with that. And I think, Jen, what struck me too is that for him to say that thing about the Athenian philosophers and the sculptures of Pericles, for that to come from someone like that who is very well read too, it's he hopes he knows his target and knows his audience, and it kind of hits the mark. I think there's something fun, Chris, that we can explore more of. What if we see a little more of next time of Septimus enjoying the fact that she has done that callback to your compliment, about the Athenian philosophers. She's listened so closely. She's like, remember that thing from 10 minutes ago? I see you and I raise you. That's hot, because it's not listening. Reading is hot. Listening is hotter in this world.
Yeah.
Like, everything is fair game. Everything has been packed away and then brought back out. It's very Oscar Wilde that way too. Very Shaw, that sense of like, I know what was in the back there, and I'm going to, and all that is ready to be deployed again.
Potentially stupid question, and I should dig out the dramaturgy packet. But when we're talking about her drawers, we're talking about underwear, right? So basically,
that's correct.
Does she wear underwear? And I say, yes, she does. She goes, oh, I wouldn't do that. Come to my room. Like, that's also hard to ignore for Septimus.
Yeah, I think it's good for us all to be on the same page, because I think it is interesting that the way that, like, Lady Croom shares her fashion proclivities, and the fact that you're sharing this in a very intimate way. I mean, the other thing that struck me for both of you this time is the intimacy that happens here. There's so much as there is the talk of the double entendres and sex and potential invitations. What I saw you two start to lean into is finding, or maybe realizing, that this other person really gets you. Like, that you're actually like look at this, like the whole section at the bottom of 75, top of 76. He insists on it, finds the proof of his wife's virtue. That I think my lady would have Mr. Chater die for her. Indeed, I never knew a woman worth the duel, or the other way about. I mean, that sounds to me like two people who are already a couple in a way,
Mhm.
of this sense of looking at the world together, looking out, if that makes sense. That sense of, yeah, what is it? What's the deal with women in duels, right? I mean, it feels like it's interesting, Jen, to me that like, you share this with him, a man who just went out to fight a potential duel. But I love that
Mhm.
you feel like, can we just talk about all the toxic masculinity bullshit of that? And
Mhm.
why any of that is even necessary, women in duels, it makes no sense. There's something I think that was there, and I would encourage us to keep leaning into. And I saw you both laughing at each other's wit, and there's the more we can learn from each other and go, wow, that's you see that too, or I hadn't thought of it
Mhm.
that way. You know, that also is part of the gradual coming together of you two in a way that feels like it's just flowing. Like when you first fight, there's a flow, right? You know, read, not read by you. Well, it should be read by me. There's that sort of, you're playing the net
Mhm.
in the tennis match that way. So there's that kind of spark. But then there's also the
Mhm.
longer thoughts later where it seems like you both are kind of dovetailing. Like, does that make sense? It feels like a third date in a good sense of like, you
Mhm.
know, like, right. And also, did you see that article about, and it feels like you both are, no, we don't know where this is ultimately going to be leading. There's still that question. And I love, Chris, that I saw you sort of, you're still on tenterhooks because, you know, I feel like Lady Croom is holding all these cards and you're still in the dark to a certain degree of like, well, things are getting hotter, but
Yeah.
at any moment she could pull the plug on all of this.
There's, I think there's some, the thing you say about like this being a third date is interesting. Because in this scene, we both have new information about each other. She
Mm,
letter, and I have the fact that she went to Byron's room.
right.
Probably like I never would have imagined that she presents herself as this one way. It's like, oh, she sneaks around just like the rest of us. She's this human, and oh, maybe there's a is there like we see each other differently now
Yeah.
when we look,
Mhm.
and we're
Yeah.
exploring that new person that we see, that new version of the person that we're seeing.
Does that track for you, Jen?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The fact that he is didn't jump to defend Mrs. Chater, didn't jump to defend Byron, made his loyalties clear, and chose discretion proactively without me having to request it,
Mm.
are all like interesting. Mhm. It's like,
Points,
you have
points,
suddenly
points.
become more interesting to me, like that is, he's like in a very precarious position, but doing all the right moves for Lady Croom.
Mm. And in a way that you both start off in a place of much more high intensity, frenetic sense of out of control, chaos. And it's interesting how over the course of the scene, your biorhythms start to match. And you do start to feel more in control. You start to get to a place of, by the end, we're burning the evidence, like we are simpatico.
Yeah.
But I like that the more you two start off in a place of high dudgeon and tons of questions and right, all this to shoot a hair. Explain yourself. How dare you? I mean, you're coming in hot, Jen, and I think it keeps you on the defensive, Chris. And then I love then you push back as well, so that it's messy. And I think that with that knowledge, like you're saying, Chris, of each other, that oh, you're human, but there's also interesting for you, Jen, of like, oh, I hurt you. Like
Hmm.
that's interesting too. Like I think in some ways maybe the two of you have done too good a job of fronting.
Mhm.
And it's taken these extraordinary circumstances to push you both in this moment of dawn, right? In this liminal moment of not day, not night is so beautiful by Stoppard that this is matching this between hour. And it is exactly this moment of like, okay, so who are we? Who are you to me? You know, things are being redefined, but it
Mhm.
is a sense of, oh, I'm getting I'm starting to breathe now again. I'm starting to feel like, okay, I'm getting some control over things. It's interesting how you both are doing that for each other.
Mhm.
But it really helps with the arc if you both are from that place of really being off kilter, right? And letting the disequilibrium keep you vulnerable. Like you said, Chris, not the cool cucumber Lady Croom, right? But I think also let's just, it's hard to do this right now, folks, without costumes or anything, but we got to remember you coming into that room in your nightgown at 6 in the morning, and when Jellaby steps away, that's scandal right there.
Yeah.
That's not appropriate. Even if it's now just you, your deaf husband, Thomasina asleep, right? Sleeping the sleep of geniuses, but still, like that's underneath has got to be that frequency of, and I'm thinking for both of you of like the elephant in the room is you've never seen her, Chris, like this, as the French say, déshabillée, right?
Right.
That is the very few people would see her like that.
Right.
And
Ugh.
she is not and taking any if she doesn't go away and say, I'll be back with my robe.
Right.
Mhm.
That and I think that's kind of interesting. I wonder, Jamie, if there's something a little fun about when she decides to do the infusion. Is there something a little fun about that? We talked about how much Jelby kind of loves the tea. As he's, leaving, oh, interesting. Okay, so they don't want a chaperone. you know, like it would only take a few minutes, but I love that it's very unusual if she's like, no, I got this. You can go. That'll be all. Yeah,
Yes,
I bet that will be all. Okay,
yes, yes, yeah. That's
right. I got to tell Cook about something's going on, something is happening, but discretion,
there's
right? But
Well,
all kinds of value in how that when she comes in with Jellaby and how it's staged. Yeah, absolutely.
well, and I wonder too. I mean, Jamie, like the fact that you've seen all this happen, but like I think for you and for Chris, she typically is the rock of the house, right? And if she is the person that is pretty unflappable, except for what happened tonight, this is really unusual, right? And we kind of the audience looks to Jamie, you and Chris to be our barometer of this, that she is the
Yeah,
way that she just bursts in the room, the way she's calling you out, the way that she's in her nightgown. Like this is
and,
not
and
Lady
as
Croom.
those who have the calling to serve do their best to be unflapped. This is flapping. this, this
Yeah,
this is definitely a unusual, and it's getting more unusual by the moment in the house. It's
right.
getting more not untenable, but just the use the foundation is a little shaky. What was known and what is now, it's all sort of in flux. And
Well, I love that, Jamie, that time when you shared the information, once you chose to share the information with Septimus, I loved that you started to explore Jellaby's kind of need to unpack this. That we saw some of the cracks in his veneer where he didn't go full Real Housewives, right? But I felt like, well, then this happened. Also, this, don't forget that. Like it starts to unspool pretty smoothly from him.
it,
And I like that.
yeah, I agree with you, and it's not so much that, I mean, I do make the reference, as like the usher or whatever, in a hotel that puts his hand out and won't leave until he gets the coin. I mean, I make the reference that Byron left nothing in the room, not a coin, sir. But it's not really. I mean, and that's something else maybe to explore, is that it's not so much. I mean, yes, I have a crown. I mean, I have is a lot, but there's a decision to confide in Septimus,
Yes,
that he
exactly.
is
That's what I'm getting
somebody
at.
that
Yes.
I can be trusted with
Mm,
this information, in some way.
yeah. Yes.
I mean, I don't know, and that's maybe a question that how long Septimus has been in the house.
Well, I think that's interesting too, Jamie, because that is, and I think Chris, that's important for you to explore as well, right? The fact that he could easily just say thank you for the coin, sir, and have a good morning, right? And that would be absolutely kosher for him to do and expected. And the fact that each thing he gives you is there is a sense of trust. And I wonder too, Jamie, is the fact that like you're still processing this as well, right? This didn't happen yesterday.
Yeah.
This is very fresh paint. So
Yeah.
maybe is there some agenda of sharing this with him in the hopes that he might offer some perspective in return, right?
Well,
Like maybe he'll fill in some blanks that you don't know.
yeah, I agree. And you know, is my situation and those in who are in this who are serving this house are our situations tenable? I mean, are things, you know, unraveling, you know, within the status quo to the point where, you know, there needs to be concern, you know?
Well, yeah, and I mean, in terms of what your duties are, like doing the infusion, it struck me, Jen, I meant to ask this last time. Why do you decide, why do you want to do it?
My gut reaction is I would like to get JELLABY out of the room in order to discuss these.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
I cannot discuss the content of these in front of JELLABY.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my impulse as to
that
why
makes
it's
sense.
like, yes, we would like the room, please. And a
You'll
reasonable
do it yourself.
excuse.
Yes. I see. Oh, I thought I might be included. Wow. Right. Okay.
Can I say this JELLABY Septimus thing? Something I noticed this time, which I thought was interesting, is that I think JELLABY is. I don't know if it's because they're all servants together. You know, it's us against them, or you know, letting you know. But he twice kind of warns Septimus when he says, "You were missed." Is that what he says?
You were missed. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, he goes another step further when he says, "You were looked for in your room," which are both things that they struck me this time as I thought, oh, JELLABY's letting him know what's going on in the house, so he's not walking in here unprepared, sort of.
Yeah, that's it. That's interesting.
Spoke to their relationship, you know, below stairs.
Yeah, because you're right, Jeffy. That's a great point. I hadn't realized that he could have just
he just taken the hair and gone, right?
Right, and let Septimus twist in the wind.
Yeah,
but he doesn't. He does give him a little bit of ammo, a little bit of a heads up, so that then what he chooses to do with that information is up to him.
Yeah, I found that.
But yeah, you're right. There's that twice he actually, you were looked for in your room, and like that's pretty great information for you, Chris. Of like, wait, what? And especially because then when Jen, you start to tell him what happened in your version, it allows you, Chris, to be like, oh, okay, so this is what you're saying. It happened, okay? Because I've got it from JELLABY, who I think is pretty neutral in this and doesn't have the same skin in the game as you do.
Yeah, because he's not only given a shield, he's also given a weapon. Right? So it's not just you were looked for and your room has been raided and your name came up loudly, but it's also when asked who was leaving whose room, like the weapon is, well, she was on her way to Byron's house. So like shield and weapon delivered.
Yeah.
You know?
That's, and information is power, right? And I love that when we can make more of the fact of, in the midst of you trying to catch up, Chris, with what's been going on in your absence, there's also the you acknowledging on the fly how amazing it is that he's giving you this. You know, that's all of this is not expected, and then before you can even fully process it, you know, you sweeping in and Jen, what's that moment about with all this to shoot a hair? Can you unpack that a little bit for me?
This is my impulse, but if other folks have ideas, I'd love to hear them. My thought is, so dueling is illegal and scandalous at this time. So the admission that this is happening in my home could be scandalous if it got about, because JELLABY still is in the room, right? So the pretense has to be kept up that he left early in the morning with 2 pistols for the purpose of shooting hares, which is, I mean, again, like shutting the barn door when the horses are out. The servants all already heard at volume the screaming that occurred last night, but we like, it is also creating the story of like, I can't believe you got up early to shoot hares. How dare you? Is my impulse.
Right. And then
But
he
if
and then you're
there's more
frustrated
to
that
it than
he's
that, you know?
no, and I love that because if
Yeah.
we go down that road, then he's not playing along. And that's even more frustrating. Like, really? Really, dude?
You're being pedantic.
Yeah. What are you, a teacher? I'm trying to spin something for everyone's sake here, and he's going, well, technically.
Yeah.
That tracks for me. Any other thoughts from the group? I mean, that helps me
Oh, I think that's
understand.
pretty good. Yeah.
That sounds right. Yeah.
We're all agreeing
Yeah.
to this version of history, right?
Yes. I also like, can we look at the stage direction? She gives him one of her looks,
I was just looking at
which
that.
to me is like, there should be like a little trademark there, right? One of the trademark Lady Croom, like number 22 of like,
Yeah, you got a
you know,
number 22 there, buddy.
I didn't clock that until just now of like, not a look, one of her looks. And she has many. She's
Mhm.
got-
Somewhere between Tallulah Bankhead and Betty Davis.
Yeah.
Little bit of
I like the idea of the like the servants having a book, a sketchbook of going, so if you get a number 22, what this means is
And the eyebrow is up here, but pointed down. Right. Kate, any thoughts?
Mm.
Nothing else for the group. This is great. I love that explanation, Jen.
That's it really that is I love that. And I think um I wondered, Jen, something to play with in that moment of you have no secrets left. I love that you two are both keeping the stakes high and that you are pushing each other to confess or to keep each other off balance. Are there also moments between the two of you of enjoying the cat and mouse? Of allowing, when do you want to take your foot off the gas and just relish, I've got you. Like, what else can you hide? You know, I don't know what that would yield, but is there something fun about the, I've got these letters, I don't know what the hell they mean, but there's something, and I think you know, what are you going to do? It feels a little like, you know, Law and Order or Homicide when the cops in the interrogation room go, you know, I mean, we've got the evidence, we've got the alibi. So what are you going to do? What's your next move? Right? So there's a fun way to still keep his feet to the fire. Sometimes it's through intensity, and sometimes what's another way to throw him off of? And the cat that ate the canary, and then Chris, that could freak you out of what else does she know? You know, what is she not? I feel like she knows something that I don't know. And so it's another tool to play with.
yeah.
Um the Yeah, I'm curious. Téa, as you were watching this time around on the outside looking in, what jumped out at you when they were piecing it together?
I think the idea that you were talking about before, the small flashlight of things, is very just like such a helpful thing for me when I'm doing things here, but also in this scene, because I feel like Thomasina and Septimus's scene in the beginning is very, it's just not as like, their scene is like do maze here, and like me and Septimus is like, okay, like what's this? So I feel like the small flashlight and discovering things about like each other and like the limits that they're pushing with each other is just so fun to see the choices that are being made. But yeah, everything that everyone has said, caught on, agreed with. Yeah.
The little revelations mean so much. I love that, Téa, that sense of no discovery is too small about each other. And I think starting with that hotness, starting with that sense of tempo and intensity, and when we come back to it next week, I would encourage on page 73, Chris and Jen, I would encourage us to even play the net more and see what happens of the how dare you propriety addressed to me left in my room, what you earthly use much from this side of it. Just see what happens if everything you're exploring, but just to see what happens if you don't give yourself time to reflect at all. Like it's very much just heat of the moment, heat of the moment. You know, that you're pinging off each other and you're not giving yourself time to breathe or take a moment to think, am I saying an appropriate thing? if that makes sense. It's and Jamie, before I forget, I'm not above this, but I think when you say the house has been up and hopping, I couldn't help but think, might you want to dangle the rabbit a little? You know, can there be a little JELLABY dad joke there of you know,
Yeah, yeah,
that
yes,
could be kind of fun.
yeah.
S- um, the
I,
and yeah, go ahead.
I just suddenly realized why it is I think I trust Septimus.
What? Why?
Well, he says that Thomasina loves a rabbit pie, and he's aware of what she likes to eat, like I am aware of how much
Yes.
rice pudding.
Aw.
You know, there's just something about that. There's a sensitivity to her, other than as a student or as transactional. You know, that there's something about that rabbit. I suddenly saw that rabbit pie, and I thought, oh, that's insignificant.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I
Very
love that.
good.
That sense of, because you're right. Like Chris, like, you know, you're holding it at arm's length. Like, I don't want to touch this. I don't want to deal with it. It's dead. And not the way I wanted to start my day or the eighth shift of my day. And the thing that immediately unlocks it for you, Jamie, is
It's
it's
just the
for
way I
Thomasina.
take the rabbit from him. You know, it's like
Right.
I say it's dead, and then he says that, and it's a very, I think, purposeful thing to take the rabbit,
Right.
you know, from him. You know, I don't know. It just was.
And no, I love that because
Yeah.
he says she loves a rabbit pie. All
Yeah.
right, I'll take it.
Wow.
You know, that's that's the secret
He truly
sauce.
cares about her.
Yeah. And which is I mean, you two both are not just employees when it comes
Right.
to her.
Yes.
And I love the sense of that, Chris, you took time again, like we talked about last week. I don't think you're someone who loves to hunt, but I love that you shoot the hair for her,
Mhm.
right? And it's really beautiful, actually. It's making her, you both want to make her happy. I mean, everyone actually cares so deeply about this young woman. And, you know, even though she, you know, I love that Joel's like, I don't know most of the stuff that comes out of her mouth, but I know she loves rabbit pie and she loves jam and her rice pudding. And I can do
She's
that
the
for her.
light of the world.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's what when she smiles when she gets that jam, that your week is made, you know, and you don't need to know all the stuff that that she's spouting, and it's above your pay grade, but that she relishes things that you can do for her,
Mm.
which I think keeps them all very human.
Oh yeah, I agree.
The and just I know we're about at time, but there was just one other thing about um the when you know, starting on again, like backing up a little bit on 75, once the when you two watch the letter being burned, I would encourage you, starting with that beat of now here there's a thing, a letter from Lord Byron, never to be read by living soul. Uh, I know it's hard right now on Zoom, but I would encourage you both to just take that moment, breathe that in of you both are on that same page of, well, there goes a letter from, you know, he was a star of his own time, right? So you know what you're doing. And the fact that if we have kept things pretty hot and intense prior to that, that naturally gives you a moment to breathe together and look at that together. And then that's when I think a turn starts to happen where you both start to have that intimacy of, wait, she's going with him? Well, not as a crew, as a mistress. Oh my God, really? You know, and then you both start to dish and start to kind of unpack. And that great, that amazing moment when you say, Jen, he insists on it, right? But is Mr. Chater deceived? He insists on it. Sometimes we are willfully blind. We are insisting that I am not being cheated on. And I think that's, but to find someone simpatico to go, yeah, I understand the irony of that. So I think there's just the opportunity when we come back to this that you both are yes-anding each other, even when you don't have lines. But it's really beautiful just to see with both scenes the dots you're connecting. So thanks for the great work today. I'm really glad we got to pull the camera back and see these on the, you know, the big picture again.
Yeah, no, these scenes are, both of them are just, these scenes are both just humming along, and it's so fun to see all the discussion that you guys have had, how that is informing the choices and the pauses people are taking, and you know what they're doing. It's just so, I mean, you know, great material, great artists, you can't lose. You know, if nobody else watches this, I'm just like sitting here going, this is so much fun. I have this, well, you know, it's like, it's my personal theater company. It's like, yes, please perform. I want to know more about these plays. These are great. But no, other people are enjoying these too. It's just wonderful though. Really, really excellent conversations, and so enjoying it. So thank you guys all so much for just another great week of work. And we'll come back next week for the final session. But yeah, really, really wonderful. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, everyone.
So yeah, have a great night. See you again.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.